All right, guys, it's time for the Next Level Guy Show, a men's interview, interest, and improvement-focused podcast featuring interviews with the greats from all industries to help you better your life. Each week, a new episode features an interview with one of the greats, covering all aspects of their story, from life hacks to tips and protocols that have allowed them to live life on the next level. We then highlight concrete action steps that you can use to improve your life. And now, your host, Ian Dawson Mackay.
And today's guest is Jonathan Decker and Alan Seawright. Cinema Therapy is a hit YouTube channel in which a licensed therapist and a professional filmmaker explore what hit movies can teach us about life, love and mental health. Jonathan Decker is a licensed marriage and family therapist and clinical director of Mended Light, a trauma-focused counselling clinic. Alan Seawright is a director, writer, editor, producer and CEO of Telekinesis Entertainment. And in this interview, we discuss the use of films to inspire, educate and motivate change, great character examples, the bond between the guys, cinema therapy, and so much more. And now, let's get to the interview. Thank you both so much for coming on. I'm a major fan of cinema therapy, but for people who maybe don't recognise your names, could you give a quick introduction? I know you're probably sick of giving this.
I'm Alan Seawright, professional filmmaker, and I need therapy.
And I'm Jonathan Decker. I'm a licensed therapist who loves movies.
Oh, I just got chills. It's like I've listened to so many videos. It's weird seeing it said to me, but in the background.
It's weird for us because we're just like middle-aged dads that we have fans who are like, say the thing, say the thing.
So what is cinema therapy and who's it aimed for?
Cinema Therapy is a YouTube show where we analyze films through the lens of our licensed therapist, Jonathan, who helps us break down sort of lessons that you can take away from films and movie characters to improve your life. Did I do a good job, Jono?
You did a good job. And I would add Alan I like to say he's the spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine go down because, one, he's very sweet. Two, he's the emotional heart of the show. I mean, and then three, he breaks down the filmmaking. And people like to geek out about the filmmaking stuff, the writing, the direction, the color, the use of color, the stunts, all of these sort of things. So I'm definitely the medicine. And fortunately, I'm not, I don't think at least, a boring old fuddy-duddy. And so at least the medicine doesn't taste bad.
You're like grape flavored medicine, and then
I'm a
the sugar
Flintstone
on top
vitamin.
of it. There you are. Oh man,
we're chocolate-covered Flintstone vitamins is what our show is.
Now you're talking.
Oh geez.
So that's our new tagline.
It sure is.
So why did you go for films? Like why was that the medium you picked to analyze?
Honestly, that was Jonathan's idea. When he says he's a licensed therapist who loves movies, he loves movies more than I do, and I made it my profession. That's 100% serious. I know this guy it's a borderline mental illness, his love for and devotion to cinema and movie watching.
We'll put that in the DSM-6, cinephilia.
Yes, cinephilia. And so it was actually, the whole show was Jonathan's idea. He called me and pitched me the show, and it took him 1.5 sentences for me to go yes in my head, and he finished another sentence and a half. So about 3 sentences in, I interrupted him and said, I know exactly what this show is. I'm in. Let's do it.
Yeah. We're generally pretty in sync in life, but I think that's the most in sync we've ever been.
Oh, it was unreal. It was like I felt tingles. Like I've connected with a human on a subatomic level.
Because it certainly comes across in your thumbnails. You know, some of them, it's like between the line between business partners and potential lovers, and you know, some of them, I'm like, okay, you know.
There's definitely a strong bromance. We have no people ship us all the time. We have no problem with that. People think we're gay all the time. We have no problem with that. It's not accurate, but like it's cool. But
Have you had any fans writing you any sort of stories about you?
I haven't seen any slash fic yet, but listen,
corners.
it's coming. If it doesn't already exist, it's coming eventually.
The darkest corners of the web have some erotic fanfic going on, but
yeah.
But there's definitely a lot of love between the two of us,
for sure,
and always has been.
And do you think that's a big part of why it's been so successful? Because you've got the therapist sort of analysis, then you've got the film lovers overview, but you've got that connection, that friendship between the two of you, and the in-jokes and the bond that you have?
Yes. I think you summed it up.
Yes, correct.
Okay, we'll tick that box.
No, I think a huge part of the appeal of the show is, having Jonathan be, frankly, a world-class expert at what he does, and having me pretend to be a world-class expert at what I do. Both good. We provide insights. We're both relatively funny, but I think what really gets people coming back is, and we get comments about this all the time. People just love seeing two dudes like bro down and love each other in a healthy way. Like, we get that all the time from people, that they're just so happy to see, brotherly love shown in a way that is positive.
Because it definitely comes across in that, like, you're both vulnerable, you're both open, you talk about things that a lot of people would rather hide. They would rather just say, "Oh, I'm not weak at all. Oh, I don't need therapy," And it's the fact that you use that as your tagline, "I need therapy," and you've got no issues with being emotional on the show and things like that. And it really comes across as two people who are there to help others. You're not just there to play a character. So, like, when I first started the site, I looked at film characters and looked at how I could get better by becoming the film character, and then use that in my own life. So was there people who you looked at when you were younger and thought, that's who I want to be like? Was it like Superman, Batman? Was there some inspiration when you were kids?
Yeah, I mean, Alan already knows my answer to this. It was definitely Superman, but very specifically Christopher Reeve's Superman. I'm a moderate Superman fan overall, but as far as like the first two Chris Reeves movies are really foundational for me, because he's very powerful and also very kind and very selfless and very honest and decent. And I once had my son was violent with his siblings over and over and over again. And I do not think there's a causal link between film violence and real life violence. That said, it was a pretty solid consequence, because he loves superhero movies and stuff, that he wouldn't get to watch anything with fighting in it as long as he was fighting in real life. Obviously, bad guys, someone tries to kidnap you, is a different story. But like, you don't punch your sister in the face because she looked at you funny. And we were trying to track down a superhero movie that didn't have any fighting in it, and literally the only one we could find was the very first Superman film with Christopher Reeves, because he literally spends the entire movie just helping people, and it's super cool.
Yeah. So Jonathan has, the paragon of virtue. My childhood idols were, I don't know if you know this, John. So Han Solo, obvious is.
I knew that one. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's half of my persona. Han Solo and Indiana Jones, very much so. The other ones that I really sort of modeled my behavior after, and this is why I had to learn and grow, and I need therapy. Martin Riggs from the Lethal Weapon movies and Mad Max.
That's nice. A combination. I like it.
So yeah, you put those four characters together, and that was pretty much me until right around the time I met Jonathan, and I had a lot of rebuilding to do.
Well, you threw Malcolm Reynolds in the mix there later on the end from Firefly, but yeah, for sure.
Malcolm Reynolds is Han Solo plus Mad Max. That's kind of who he is anyway.
Valid. Totally valid.
You had Martin Riggs. Does he not torture the therapist in the first one when he's sitting just driving her crazy every day, telling her, "Oh, we cannot be together," and "No, don't be," "I don't want to date you," and all that, and she's screaming at him to go get help.
Yep.
That
was very much me. I've made a lot of progress. I've learned and grown.
Well, you've literally done that to at least one therapist, from what you've told me.
Correct. Yes. Yep.
You're going to help me. You want to help me, and I'm going to make you suffer for it. And
there's your tagline. I like it. So why do you think films, why do they create such like emotion and shock and on? Because I've read up about cinema therapy, and how how it helps people. But why do films create such emotion and kind of enjoyment? And how can they transform us and inspire? What is it about it, do you think? Is it the imagery? Is it the character arcs? Is it the Joseph Campbell hero journey?
All of the above. It is hundreds of people who are very smart, working very hard for years at a time to do exactly those things. The whole point of a movie is to make you feel stuff enough that you want to give somebody, $10 or however many euros a movie ticket is in Europe. It's all calculated, man. It's a magic trick. We're all here trying to take money out of your wallet and make you feel a thing. That's it.
Well, and then that speaks to one of the motives of the creative team, and it can vary from person to person, and even within the same person, different motives across time. For some people, it's definitely, I want to make people feel things and take their money for it, and fortune and glory, kid, fortune and glory. Mm-hmm. And then you look at other cases, like we just watched Encanto for an upcoming episode, and we had a conversation about there are definitely screenwriters and filmmakers who are using their gifts, yes, to make money, yes, as a livelihood, but you can't watch Encanto or Coco and not see a team of people who are trying to do something good that helps people. I mean, it's just right there on the surface of it.
Well, and just look at Steven Spielberg, about half of his movies are just populist, like I'm going to make a thing that's really fun. And part of the reason is I want a thing that's fun to exist in the world. And the other part of the reason is I think I can get $1 billion from it. And the other half of his movies are, I don't care how little money this makes. This is an important story that must be told, and I'm the best one to do it.
Yeah.
And that's one guy doing those two different, wildly different things.
He does kind of approach it like one for you, one for me, one for you, one for me.
Yeah, but they're all for him. That's the crazy part.
Do you see that?
Do
you see that changing? Like, do you see that becoming modern day films rely more on CGI and bangs and explosions and less story, less kind of it's a story that needs to be told?
I think that's a consequence of studios being owned by giant multinational corporations that are focused on the bottom line. And when you have a bottom line focus, if you're going to invest money, you invest it in the things that have the highest likelihood to make the most money. And that's blockbusters, right? Mm-hmm. Blockbusters, generally speaking, over the last 40 years, lots of sci-fi, lots of action, lots of fantasy. Those are the things that people show up for in the millions. And so that's what companies focus on. I don't think it's necessarily that that's what the filmmakers are focusing on. It's that's what filmmakers can get financed by the big studios. Now, you go outside of big studios and you look at, independent film or smaller studios, particularly outside of the US, outside of the Hollywood system, and you get a huge variety of things. And it's very, character focused, important story focused. But
Ian, if I can say two things really quick. One, backpedaling to your earlier question about why cinema is so powerful. From a clinical perspective, cinema therapy, or the concept of using movies to supplement therapy, has been around for decades. I didn't come up with the idea.
Right.
I capitalized on the idea, and I also there are people who can create better content, do better research than I can. There's not a lot of people who can present it better than I can. I've been to a million presentations where I've been like, I could never come up with this. I don't have the brain to come up with something this brilliant or to find or discover something this brilliant, but the presentation is boring as hell and it's killing me. And I just want to take it and I want to take it and translate it into a way that is easily digestible so people see how powerful it is. Because sometimes the power is lost in the presentation. Right. And so that's the power of cinema to me is here we have these abstract concepts and actually seeing them play out makes them real and makes them powerful. And so that's the kind of the clinical answer to that question. And then what you brought up about, are we too focused on blockbusters and are we too focused on special effects? and Alan, I'd love your thoughts on this, but it seems to me like we're in a different era than we were growing up, meaning theatrical was everything when we were growing up. And if it was direct to video, that was a
terrible movie.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And now Ben Affleck said recently that he thinks in the near future, theaters are really only going to show blockbusters, which I think is the sad truth, unless you're in a major city with art house cinema. But we do have a new frontier of streaming where you're getting a lot of low to mid budget, very well directed, very well written, very well performed stuff. And it can find an audience very quickly. In fact, maybe even better than the theater system, because people, even in the 90s, didn't go out in droves for indie films, whereas they might get something a shot from their couch.
Yeah, because I think this is the thing is like there's so much money getting thrown about just now, and people are saying, well, that made money. Let's just stick to that, let's stick to that script. Let's go for that, like the Marvel films, the John Wick movies. It's like, let's not deviate and try this. Apologies if I cut you off there originally.
No.
This is the problem with two people. Sometimes it's like, I think they're finished and I'm about to jump in and I hate when you listen to a podcast and people are cutting off the other person. So that's the thing. It's like, that's what I love about your show is you're just back and forth between each other. And there's that, you both go from your side of the expertise. Do you think that's something that you both are so good at is that you can take like very extensive concepts and break them down and explain them in layman terms and make it fun and make it, enjoyable?
I do think that that's a gift that we both have. Jonathan already said he's an exceptional presenter, and John wasn't tooting his own horn enough. He is an exceptionally good presenter. Like he's taking really complicated concepts and breaking them down and generally making them fun and funny, which is not, I've been working for a long time with doing that. Like that's my job. Most of what I've done is commercials and then like corporate films where you're trying to teach people stuff, and it's incredibly maddening. I wish I could have just had Jono do everything for my whole career. But
thanks, man.
So he's very good at that. I'm pretty good as a sort of, I don't think I'm as good as Jonathan, but that's totally fine. But yeah, taking those concepts and breaking them down. What was the question?
The question is, that was brilliant right there.
I think that's something that I like about it is like, when I seen your show, I got like jealous as hell because you both had this way of taking these amazing concepts and teaching and educating, but making it fun, making it enjoyable. Because when I started podcasting, I was like, so what's your name? Like, there was no emotion, there's no passion.
Sure.
Even now, I'm like a serial killer. I just come across as kind of without emotion. And I love that kind of back and forth. And I never came away from an episode with you guys thinking, that wasn't so good. I learned so much about myself and other people and the world. And so how, is it just come naturally, do you think? Or is this something you both worked on?
My opinion is Alan has a particular knack when it comes to filmmaking and to the artistry of it that if you don't hook people, and I don't mean just like with a hook, I mean emotionally and with humor, then you lose them. Mm-hmm. I know the reason I present the way I do is because this is how I learn. If I'm not entertained into learning something, then either I won't learn it or it will take me a long, painful time to learn it. And then I'll be like, oh, there's such a better way to do this. And then I think it helps that even though we're both experts in our respective fields, we understand enough of each other's world to have a cross dialogue. That it's not just like, okay, now Alan's going to do his thing and then the gear shift and now John does his thing. As Alan mentioned, I love cinema. And so even though I'm not in the industry, I know I have an encyclopedic memory of movie quotes is what he likes to say.
Yep. It's frightening.
And then Alan, even though Alan hates academia, which to his defense, I'm not a huge fan of it either. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the good it does in the world, but I'm not a huge fan of like the culture of it.
Correct. Yep.
Alan is very well read. So even he says, I need therapy, and he talks freely on the show that he's been to therapy, but he's also done a lot of work on himself and also just knows a lot about the world in general. And so when I talk about psychological terms, I'm generally not talking to someone who goes, huh? What does that even mean? And so I think that helps a lot.
Yeah. Well, and I know just enough about those things that I can sometimes spot when Jono's drifting into professional land a little bit, and I can either bring him back or I can make a joke out of explaining the thing that he just said.
Yeah.
And Jono does the same thing for me as well. We ended up with a really good dynamic. And I think that a lot of that, like, I'm going to speak for you, Jonathan. Jonathan has a background as a performer and particularly performing comedy. I have a performing and then a directing background, which is a performance of its own. You're trying to get, emotion out of people. And between the two of us, we haven't had to do an awful lot of work to get our rapport to work on the show, but we brought, decades worth of work into that.
Well, from our lives, and then a 16 year friendship when we started the show.
Yeah.
There's a lot of back history there. There's also, you brought up earlier, Ian, our rapport and our friendship is very real. There's a lot of love between us. There's also, like any friendship, there's strain sometimes, and there's conflict and there's disagreement. And so there's two things. Mm-hmm. There's been a couple times where we've been like, well, we got to figure this out because we can't fake it on camera, like the regard that we have for each other. So we have to work through our shit, number one. And number two, we're up here preaching healthy relationship skills. So we should probably put those to use to work through some things. And
to be fair, Jonathan can't fake it. I can totally fake the recording.
No, that's true. There've been times when we were gonna have a shoot, and I'm like, we need to resolve this before we shoot, and you're like, I'm fine, like we can resolve it after. I'm a professional. I'm like, I'm not. I will just be sitting there I'll be making dagger eyes at you, and like there will be no rapport, and I'll
just be like, oh, Jono, wow, what an insight.
And so I don't want to give the impression that we have this magical, effortless friendship. Relationships take work. Healthy relationships take work. I think we have a very healthy relationship, but it's not without the labor.
It's not all sunshine and roses. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that makes it more beautiful, actually. Like, I think the stuff that we've passed through together has actually solidified that bond more than if we were just two bros who had just enjoyed some good times once in a while.
Yeah, for sure.
And do you think then that this is something like that, like films could change everybody? Is it a possibility that any film could inspire, or do you have to kind of come into it knowing? I mean, I've done CBT, I've had depression, I've used antidepressants and things like that. Mm-hmm. And I found films were one of the few things that really inspired me and motivated me to change depending on which film it was. Like Fight Club, for example. Like the fact that you could create a alter image and try to become it, and all these kind of like Limitless, for example, this kind of thing like blew my mind that you could be like that. But do you think that you have to come in wanting to change? You have to be on the start of that journey, or can you be motivated to change from a film?
I think a little bit of both. There are movies so every movie speaks to every person differently, right? Like a common aphorism in the industry is every movie is someone's favorite movie, meaning like no matter how bad a film you made, someone out there is going to watch it and go, wow, that's my favorite movie ever. And no one that worked on it believes them, so that's a common thing. So every movie has the potential to be that sort of lightning in a bottle moment for someone. Mm-hmm. I think most people at some point in their lives will be receptive enough going into a movie that even if it's not a lightning in the bottle type movie for them, if they're feeling receptive, they can do that. And then I think Jono's going to get to sort of the point of our channel, which is...
I feel like you set me up for something and I don't know what my line is.
Oh, no, your line is, this is your worst nightmare. What we do is educate people on being receptive.
Oh, yeah. No, I totally knew that. I was just,
you were making sure I knew. Yeah.
Giving you a chance to shine. No, it's the whole, being receptive to movies is a lot like being receptive to people. That there are very few perfect films. There are even fewer perfect people. And I'm a much more optimistic person by nature than Alan is. Even though
True.
but also he's a lot more critical when it comes to films. I see the same flaws that he does, not all of them because he's got a better eye for it, but I see a lot of the same flaws. They just don't matter as much to me because I'm like, yeah, I'm watching a movie, wee, and but I think that's a healthy way to approach people. I think we all need, not all of us, but I think a lot of us need more understanding, especially if we're going to change. And so there are a lot of channels out there that make their buck, like ripping films to shreds and having a cheap laugh at their expense. And don't get me wrong, some of them are very witty, and I enjoy a lot of them.
Sure.
But I noticed just a major lack, I think, of cinema wins, and I can't think of any others whose real existence is. Yeah,
there's only a couple of other channels that really get out there and celebrate sort of great cinema. Every Frame of Painting did it, but then he gave up.
Yeah. Well, and cinema wins, or even some films that are not that amazing, but what can we find in here that's still good?
Right.
Which is why people are sometimes taken aback at how vicious our Twilight episodes are. And the simple fact is we need catharsis as much as anybody. And we saw in there an opportunity to roast something while still doing something helpful. And people have told us those episodes inspired them to leave an abusive relationship, right? To recognize it for what it was. And so, and then of course we've had Twihards I had someone yesterday who just commented that my license that I should get my tuition money back for my psych degree because I don't understand Twilight. And I got,
wow.
I got snarky.
You got salty, didn't you?
I replied, I tried on those very grounds and it was a no-go.
I mean, apparently that was written for Henry Cavill, and he was quite horrified when he got asked, what do you think about that? And he was like, yeah, let's not go into that.
She saw young Henry Cavill in Count of Monte Cristo, and that was her Edward in her mind.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, my respect level for Henry Cavill I didn't think it was possible to go up higher, but it just did.
He was just sitting horrified, it's just. Again, I think that's the impression nowadays, though, is you get a lot of films where it's popular because it's popular. Everybody likes it, so everybody and the Twilight films are creepy, but I like the way you do talk, you do rip them, you take the piss, as the British would say, out of things, but you give an explanation of why it's not right and what it means and how, if this is in your life, how you could change it. I think you do that fantastically, and your thumbnails are fantastic.
Thank you.
I love how you were on
Twilight thumbnails are largely Alan's. Well, the thumbnails are always Alan's wife, Megan, is making them, but the ideas for those thumbnails are almost exclusively her, and she knocked those out of the park time and time again.
Because that's something I do like about the show is you're not afraid to go through, into PTSD, imposter syndrome, depression, all the dark stuff.
Sure,
Whereas a lot of channels will just go, oh yeah, we've interviewed very fluff piece with so-and-so, and we've asked them 3 questions and nothing more challenging than what's your name, But you guys go into it in depth. How do we deal with films that touch on the dark side? Where we're actually thinking we dislike a character. Is that an indication that's part of ourselves we dislike? Is that the kind of, what do we do when we note characters? How should we analyze films when we cry, when we laugh, and when we see a dark theme that we're struggling against? Is there a way, how would you advise us to watch the films and analyze it and go from there? I know that was about 50 questions, but
that's 100% you, Jonathan. Go.
I don't think there's one right answer to that. I think there are various ways to analyze films, and they're all valid. I like to say the phrase "watch movies with your brain turned on," and people say, "Well, that's the point. I like to turn my brain off and enjoy the show." And I get the relaxation component of films. I'm not talking about nitpicking plot points. I'm talking about what is this telling me about humanity? And what is this telling me about human nature? What is this telling me about my life? And also, just because it's on screen doesn't mean I'm going to accept it as a valid source of information. And so I'm talking about thinking critically about the films we watch. in terms of life application. If there's a character you dislike, it could be because the character was made to be dislikable and they may have nothing to do with you. I find Bill Paxton in True Lies intensely dislikable and very entertaining, but I also don't really relate to him. Maybe that says I dislike people who are homewreckers. Okay. Maybe there's something deeper there.
Sure.
But I do think there's other times, like Steve Carell in The Office, in the American version of The Office, I realized I was having a problem with him because there are certain things about him that reminded me of me. And that was one of the worst days of my life.
Because it's something you do see on social media, people saying the thing you dislike in others is the thing you hate about yourself. And I was thinking, yeah, but the character might be written to be a dick. It's not.
Sometimes true doesn't mean always true.
Right. I don't dislike Walter White because I'm secretly cooking meth and murdering people. I dislike Walter White because he does the biggest heel turn in like film history. That being said, fascinating and brilliantly done. Absolutely love watching it. Not a character that I want to emulate in any way. And yeah.
I mean, is that something we should act as if, like we should pretend to be the character? Or should we look at the characters and think, what are they doing that's good, and adopt these sort of habits into our own lives?
The first, then the second. I think we experience things vicariously through the characters. So sometimes we need to have a good cry, and we cry with the characters. Sometimes I definitely, Rocky Balboa came out 5 days before my mom died, and that whole film is about a father and a son whose wife and mother has died, and they're dealing with the fallout from that. I mean, it's only on the fringes about boxing. Like it's probably my favorite of that whole franchise. Came out 5 days before she died, and I didn't know she was going to die. And then after she passed, like 2 weeks later, once the funeral was done, I took my dad to see that film, even though it was very on the nose, and in that case could be considered triggering. And it was a very healing experience for us. A lot of the messaging and a lot of the things that the characters were going through were very similar to our own journey. And so we can watch films, and you can watch Fight Club, you can watch Walter White, and you can experience things vicariously. And sometimes it's a warning, right? And you don't need to learn that lesson the hard way because you saw how it played out on screen. Whether or not you should emulate a character, I think, is up to your judgment. Right. That's why I say watch movies with your brain turned on, because you don't want to emulate. I love James Bond, which is ironic because I'm a healthy relationships guy. Love James Bond. Would never emulate James Bond. Because I watch those with my brain turned on and say, well, this is fun escapism. I wish I lived in a world where bullets couldn't touch me and gorgeous women threw themselves at me and there were no consequences, and I could save the world over and over and just be a total badass. But because I watch it critically, because I'm not going to treat women like that.
You don't live in that world because it's a fantasy world.
Exactly.
I think to boil that down, empathizing with characters is a thing that you should always do. The more anyone can practice empathy, the better. And, cinema is a like no consequences way to practice empathy, right?
Yeah.
Whether or not you emulate is, fully up to like what you want to get out of your life. But empathy should not be optional.
Yeah. It is something like, I used to do where if I was bored at work, I'd pretend to be Jack Bauer trying to defuse a nuclear war, try to get a report written in time or something like that, Or if I was in the gym, I'd pretend I was Rocky training like montage for a fight or something, I think sometimes people do.
I think you and I are clones because I've done those two things exactly.
Because it does get to that point where you're just like, I need somebody to come in here shooting just now to, I need a bomb to go off to kind of get this a bit more exciting. But it's, I don't know, it's difficult because is it at the point where, we're using it for escapism to allow you to get away from your, just to enjoy the 2 hours away from your daily life? Or is that a sign that you're needing more? How should we deal with watching films that start making us think about our lives? Do we journal it? Do we start thinking about it? At what point do you start thinking I need to take action?
I mean, look, even things where it's fantastical, there's truth to it. And so you fantasize about being Jack Bauer, so did I. That didn't necessarily mean that I wanted to combat terrorists and test my resolve against torture. But it might mean you need more excitement in your life. Or it might mean that watching that show was the excitement in your life, and then you're fine. For all we dump on Twilight, we say repeatedly in all those episodes, if it's your escapist fun, go for it. If you're watching Twilight and the story appeals to you and you think, I would love to have two gorgeous guys fighting over me and I would love to exist in a world of vampires and werewolves and this is trashy fun, that's great.
Yeah, we cannot, as James Bond fans, trash people who love Twilight the way we love James Bond.
Yeah.
That would be deeply hypocritical.
Like, I used to do pickup when I was younger. I fell into that market, and I was like, people are like, act like James Bond, and you'll get all the girls. And I was thinking, no, because if you did that, you would be done for sexual harassment. You'd be up in court. But I love the confidence things that he does, the style, the mannerisms.
Mm-hmm.
So there's parts of a character you can take, but it's trying to have that part of like, how do you analyze a character? How do you get to that point? How do you look? Because people would argue that films are portraying masculinity in a bad way. Unless you're built like The Rock, unless you're built like Chris Hemsworth as Thor. You're a sub character. You're not like the leading man. Are films nowadays creating masculinity to be? You have to be big and strong, and if not, you're a bit character.
More in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was worse in the 80s, and then we kind of got away from it a bit in the 90s. I think Die Hard was a big influence on moving away from that, because Bruce Willis in Die Hard is, he's still Bruce Willis. He looks like a movie star, but he was not some big hulking tank either. He was kind of a regular guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, the body image stuff goes in cycles. The defining what masculinity is and what it can mean, I think has actually been slowly improving.
Mm-hmm.
If you take film portrayal as an aggregate, I think it's getting healthier. It wouldn't hurt if we went faster, but
yeah,
But
we have okay, I'm gonna go spoilers for 20 seconds if anyone's listening and hasn't seen Spider-Man No Way Home. You're one of the few people on the planet who hasn't seen it. But what a wonderful example there. My favorite moment in that film is when when she says no, when Mary Jane says no, or MJ says let's kick some ass, and then they go, heal that ass. Yeah, let's heal that ass, and then the whole mission of the heroes is to help. I thought that was super cool. Alan talks about Ted Lasso all the time. I like the show The Rookie with Nathan Fillion. I wish there were more cops like that in real life, because his skill is de-escalation. His skill is empathy, and that's what makes him a good cop. I love to see more of that in the media, because Spider-Man still kicks ass, but it's kind of okay, you can be strong, but true heroism isn't kicking ass. True heroism is using great power comes great responsibility, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's another conversation for another day. But I think that's a big issue for the Snyderverse for Alan and I, is there's a lot of impotent male rage.
Because, I mean, I definitely agree. Like, people are saying, oh, it's all dumbed down now, and it's all big bangs, and you've got to be built like a brick shit house and all this kind of stuff. And
a brick shit house? That's awesome. We don't say shit house enough here. We have brick house, like that old, was that Rick James song? But like, we need it. I'm gonna
you don't hang out with enough people from Boston, man. Everyone.
But I mean, that's the thing. It's like characters nowadays actually have personalities. They're more 3D. They've actually got flaws. They've got like believable, real, motivations. They're not just taking over the world. Why? Because it's written in the script. They've actually got. You can almost look at them and think, he's got a bit of justification. His methods might be off, but I do agree with like Thanos. There's certain characters you go, yeah, I wouldn't need much to convince me to join his side.
Well, and to your point, I think we talk about like, is the masculine ideal Thor? And frankly, aside from you have to be a Chris Hemsworth giant bodybuilder guy. like if you look at Thor's character through sort of the Infinity Saga, his character goes through an awful lot and completely breaks down and falls apart and is vulnerable and is happy to be vulnerable with his fellow Avengers. Right. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's also not dealing with things very well in Endgame. He's drinking a lot, but like he's also just constantly, you know, willing to put his feelings out in a way that, you know, sometimes it's played for laughs, but it's also very obviously played as sincere.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know that guy in real life, but I know a bunch of that guy in real life who are, you know, these big, strong, super like hyper masculine guys who will, you know, cry at the drop of a hat and give you a big hug and, you know, just super gentle, loving souls, but they just look like a brick shit house, you know?
Yeah.
Because it is something that's like, you know, we think
if I ever
nowadays...
go into wrestling, that's going to be my name, by the way.
Brick shit house.
Yeah.
But that's because that's the thing, isn't it? It's like people go, oh, nowadays, to be a man, you've got to be strong, you've got to be big, and you're like, no, you know, it's just idiotic that we still think that.
Well, I mean, strength has many forms, you know, and there's big muscular strength, but the what we're seeing more and more of, which I applaud, is a type of moral strength, a type of integrity that what makes these stories heroic. And for example, we see it in Wonder Woman. The first one, I'm not super crazy about the second one, but I'm a big fan of the first one, that her strength was, yes, physical, but more it was character. It was integrity. It was compassion is what made her strong. Because the fact is, doing the right thing is not boring, and it's not, doing the right thing is exceptionally hard. And it's powerful to see characters who struggle with it and then get there. I think that's one of the reasons Tony Stark resonates so much. And it's powerful to see characters who try to do the right thing and it seems to make things worse, which I think is why Peter Parker resonates so much, you know?
Yep.
And so there's, I going back to Chris Reeves, you know, we had that, and I don't know why we didn't have 1,000 imitators of that, because that was beautiful. That, yeah, his superpowers were super cool, but even as a kid who you think would be fixated on superpowers and his laser vision, and he could catch a helicopter with one arm, like I came away with how he would salute people that he had just saved, or how he would smile and ask if they're okay, or he'd make sure that, and he never bragged. There's no braggadocio. There was no ego. You know, we see, and then there's a resurrection of that with Captain America, right? And so, to the point of your question, I love a good muscle-bound 80s actioneer as much as anybody. I think Commando is one of the greatest pieces of trash cinema that's ever been created, and I don't mean that as an insult. But there's something special about characters that you can aspire to be like.
Because I mean, if you look at like the villain in Commando, he's wearing chainmail, and you're like, what the, like why? But I know what you mean. It's like you can watch that, put on Predator, and go, right, this is great. 2 hours, I'll just kill some time. And then there's films that you put on and you go, wow, that's amazing, right? I want to change my life. I want to be like this. Like I love the Eddie transformation in Limitless. That you could go from the lowest point in your life, struggling with a breakup, not completing a work, to suddenly some inspiration. I know he takes a tablet, but do you think films give a inappropriate message that transformation can be quick? How did you guys start your own personal transformation journeys using these films?
The nature of film is you only have 2 hours, so it has to be quick, unless we're talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where you can stretch it out over a decade. But you don't generally get to do that because you can't plan on having an audience that shows up $1 billion a pop for that long. And so just by the nature of storytelling, we kind of need to do that. But that's not just a film problem. That's the nature of storytelling, right? You tell a story and it has to end. Life Jonathan often says, like there aren't happy endings in life. There's like happy middles.
Yeah.
Because you get to a happy place and then that ends and you're not happy again. And then you'll get happy again after that. And, hopefully the happiness outweighs the unhappiness. And then
presumably you could have a happy ending. Like if you die surrounded by family and you're happy with what you did with your life, but the idea that like you reach this point, you meet the love of your life and you're happily ever after. And the remaining decades, right, are just bliss is bullshit. And that's what Alan's referring to is we have cycles of hardship and cycles of prosperity and cycles of happiness and cycles of depression and anxiety. And the key is to thrive as much as you can and to use your suffering as, Alan says you can never have too much empathy. Suffering gives us empathy if we don't get hardened by it.
It's time for a quick break. There are millions of potential products to buy, so how do you know which ones are worth your hard-earned money? Simple. You go to nextlevelguy.com/affiliates and explore those that will transform and improve your life. You'll find deals, listener exclusives, and special offers with some great companies. Recommendations are 100% honest and only on items Ian has tried or believes in. The companies showcased will make you a better man in all areas of your life. Simply go to nextlevelguy.com/affiliates and level up.
So when we're watching films, should we be, do you just go in and look at it and then think about it later on? Would you agree that journaling is a good thing? Where you actually write down what made you laugh, what made you be inspired. How would you advise somebody listening to start watching your videos, start watching films going forward to think, I'm not just going to look at this as 2 hours of fun. I'm going to look at this as 2 hours potentially of character growth or understanding of the world or myself in a better way?
A lot of therapists will tell you to journal, and it's a great therapeutic tool. It works for a lot of people. I personally hate journaling. It's not that I don't see the value in it. I just hate it. I feel the same way about math. And so I think I personally don't watch movies with a notebook. When we watch, I know Alan does. When we're watching for our shows, I'll watch them just to enjoy them. And then afterwards, I'll go in and start writing down my thoughts, and I might scroll through the timeline to find the moments that jumped out at me. But if you're watching our episodes or you're watching, and one of our episodes is about something going on in your life, by all means, go in like with questions. Or I've seen fans journal and write notes. Alan, I have to share this with you if you haven't seen it. If you haven't, telling you about it's going to be fun, but you have to see it. But she's done a whole cinema therapy journal with illustrations and different fonts and different sizes. And like, it's really super cool, artistic. And I'm like, we should publish that and split the profits.
Wow.
But I'm giving a very long-winded answer that's not going anywhere. Whatever works for you.
Yep.
Sorry.
Because, I watch films and it's only later on I'll think, I'll say something and I'll go, where did that come from? Oh yeah, that's so. Or you'll do something, or you'll act in a certain way because of it. Mm-hmm. So like, something I really wanted to do was to throw out some prompts and for you guys to say what you think are great films or characters or, examples of that. So for example, when you did like Accepting Times as They Are, Groundhog Day, for example, fill in there. Mm-hmm. You had examples of masculine men, Aragon. Is there things like, is there people like, would you say Tony Stark's a great example of somebody going through maturity and a growth, like a personal development through the films?
Tony Stark's arc is going from, self-centered narcissism to, not full, like, others-focused altruism, but, pretty much. Like his whole story throughout the films and especially in Avengers Endgame is, keeping what's mine. And then he still makes the sacrifice that he's needed to make.
And I think he's a good example because he's a bad example. And by that, I mean that,
he's a believable and relatable example.
He gets it wrong as often as he gets it right, which I know there are people who crucify him for that, but I'm like, oh, that's what makes it powerful because he keeps getting up The one thing Tony gets right across the board from the beginning of the first film, once he's in that cave and he has that kind of paradigm shift, is that he's going to dedicate his life to making things right and to helping people. Like his overall life mission, he doesn't waver from.
Yeah, his ideas about how to do it, varying degrees of not great.
And he's blinded by his own. I've said this to Alan before. I've met a handful of geniuses in my life, and every genius I've ever met is an idiot in one way or another.
Yeah.
And he's blinded by his own hubris and his own confidence in his own, this is how I want to do things, which is also something that he grows out of.
Because he's definitely got the immaturity, and he's like dating girls and being loud and obnoxious at the start, and at the end he's selfless and he's helping he saves everybody, and
right.
I like that. It's like that's something you could show to people and say you weren't the same person that you were 10 years ago. You've got that growth, you've got that, and it's a good way of showing people that you can start as a dickhead, you can grow into this amazing contribution to society. And what about things like people who are seeking redemption, people who are, like imposter syndrome, things like that? Is there character arcs that you've seen that you think are great examples of these?
Imposter syndrome or seeking redemption?
I'm just sort of thinking of things like negative things, like seeking redemption. It was something I was struggling to think of a good example.
We just did one on Black Widow, and that's our whole episode is on her trying to get the red out of her ledger and the atonement process of making things right.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the great stories are redemption stories. You look at characters. Oh, my issue is I have so many in my head that my brain's not slowing down enough to land on one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when we're talking about seeking redemption, that's most characters. Honestly, they're seeking redemption for one thing or another. Mm-hmm. I am having a tough time coming up. Do you have any thoughts on imposter syndrome, like overcoming imposter syndrome, Jonna?
Other than what's his name
from Cochrane in Star Trek First Contact.
Yeah.
Because that was one I had thought about, like, when he doesn't believe he's going to go on to become the scientist that helps them be discovered and
helps found the Federation, right?
Yeah. I mean, for example,
Three Amigos.
Oh, there you go.
Three Amigos, absolutely.
Yep, 100%.
I mean, if you look at like Silver Linings Playbook, that was the first film I'd ever seen that really addressed mental health openly, like that. It didn't have like a sort of sub-genre. It was, this is two people struggling with their mental health who find each other and help each other. And that was kind of like, right, they were actually going into it. Like when I started the podcast, I was desperate to meet guys like yourselves who wanted more from life to do stuff. Everybody else I knew just wanted to go to the pub and get drunk. Whereas I was like, I need to go and do stuff. I was getting bored. I was living I didn't really have great friends at the time. And so I looked at like Neo, that journey, choosing your path and choosing your own destiny kind of thing. And it kind of, I didn't think I was Neo, like bending time and all that, but it made me think, well, I'm making my own path. I'm choosing the red pill. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. So there is that kind of thing. And what about like things like integrity? I can't speak today. Would you say that's Captain America?
Yeah, but getting out of the MCU, I think definitely in Lord of the Rings, definitely in Harry Potter, you have a lot of doing what's right, even though people oppose you.
Yeah.
There's the whistle. What was that movie with Russell Crowe from like an Al Pacino where is it the whistleblower? No, it's
The Insider.
The Insider, yeah. The Insider is definitely and then Concussion with Will Smith comes to mind.
It's
a lot of based on true story movies. 42, the Jackie Robinson story, was really good.
If you look at like how film can change people, how it can adapt and stuff, But how do you think films change you guys in particular? Have you had any kind of things that you could attribute to watching films?
Oh, easily 3/4 of my personality and my life choices are based on film. So that's not a good question for me.
The biggest influence that film has had on my life is it's bonded me to other people. And I do feel this kind of call to help other people. And so film is the sugar. It's the chocolate around the Flintstone vitamin. I see my passion for film is, okay, this is how I do good. Right. How films affect me personally depends on the film. I know that I once had a really rough week at school, in graduate school, and I went to see Hot Rod in theaters, and I felt so much better. No, just because I laughed. I didn't stop laughing almost the entire film. And there's not a whole lot of great commentary in that film. I mean, there's a little bit of a message, but it's mostly just I felt my spirits lifted.
Silly. Yeah.
And then I hadn't seen Schindler's List until we did our episode for the show. And Schindler's List, I think, has profoundly affected me forever.
Yeah.
Because
Life is Beautiful is the type of man, father, husband I try to be, like that sort of stuff.
Like Good Will Hunting was a great film. You know, it kind of opened up about somebody who went on a journey, like when they're sitting talking at the building site, and he said, the best part of my day is when I go up and thinking you might not be there. You know, like he wants the best for his friend, even though he knows that's his life going ahead. He's willing to put in that. And, you know, and it's a great, like, that it opens up that the transformation you can get from going to see a therapist and speaking to somebody and being open and, you know, but what has your particular friendship taught you about building strong connections with other people? And, you know, you've got an amazing a community who absolutely adore you. But what has doing the show and looking at all these films taught you about building relationships and strong connections and making better friendships?
I know I think this is just scratching the surface, but we went to FanX last year, which is a comic convention or a pop culture convention in Salt Lake City, and met, you know, hundreds of people who enjoy the show. And not just enjoy the show, but have had their lives touched or influenced in a big way by the show. And, you know, we loved hearing the people like, you make us laugh. We watch you every week. But we got a couple people who, you know, what we're doing changed their lives in a very positive way, or even in one case, saved their life. And I think Alan and I were already connection people. We highly valued friendships. We highly valued people. I think that's why we're doing the show in the first place. But it's given us a wider frequency, right, to reach and also to be touched by. You know, we hear people's stories or we hear people's insights, and we're not the experts up here just blowing smoke out of our arse. We're learning from our fans as well. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned doing the show is not just that every movie is someone's favorite movie, but almost everyone is someone's favorite person, or should be. Yeah. You know? Or they're awful, and maybe they wouldn't be so awful if they were someone's favorite person. You know? And that's not true across the board. I can think of a handful of people who I'm just like, oh, no, you're just actually terrible. But but most people just need understanding and love and compassion. And then they'll be willing to receive correction or feedback.
That's very well put, like, because it's something when I see the interactions between you two, I think that's a friendship I'd love to have. You know, like that kind of the jokes and the thing, but the bond is there. You can see how deeply you care for each other. I know you probably don't admit it to each other, but it's
no, we do.
Oh, we're happy.
It's not even. It's not even especially performative, meaning we're pretty much the same when the cameras are off. We're more focused when the cameras are on. That is literally the only difference.
Yeah, the only difference is we have a point that we're trying to get to. Other than that, that's it. I mean, we don't even, we swear the same amount. We just edit it out for the show.
So I love the behind the scenes, you know, like when you're showing, like you're interacting and, you know, when you're making the thumbnails and stuff like that. And it's fantastic to see that you're still the same people off camera
Yeah.
as much as you are on camera. But how has becoming fathers changed you? You know, you both got beautiful families, but has it changed you in any
There was
way?
no transition for that question, man. You did that was a hard left. You guys are great behind the scenes. What do you think about fatherhood?
What do you think about fatherhood?
Well, I mean, it's behind the scenes sort of thing. Well, behind the cameras, isn't it?
True. Although our kids keep lobbying to get in front of the camera. We'll see if that ever happens. How has fatherhood changed me? It's hard to get outside myself and see how that might, like, what changes might have happened just because they've been so gradual. And I was not one of those guys that, like, you know, my wife gives birth and I hold the baby and, like, there's an angel choir singing and, like, I love this child. I was like, well, here's a wriggling worm thing. And then I didn't sleep for 6 months and I was like, wow, I hate this. Being a father totally sucks.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's not always for some people. Some guys hold their baby and it's like magic, right? Not me.
I did by the time like my last kid came around, because then I was like, okay, I know where this is going. And like, I was like, oh, but my first kid, I was like, what? Oh my gosh. Like I'm entrusted with this. It's so vulnerable. And then yes, like the lack of sleep thing, because you want to be a good husband. So like as much as possible, you're going to be the one to get up. And even though you're not lactating, at least you can bring the baby to the lactation station and, you know, you can be the one to get out of bed.
Yeah. No, and that's, so it's a different process for everybody. But because of that, I've grown into being, I hope, a good father, like really slowly. And so it's hard to sort of measure that. But like, just, I'm definitely more patient than I used to be. Jono will confirm that. I am, I think I'm more empathetic than I used to be, not just to my children, but to everyone, just because I have to spend so much time empathizing with people who make no damn sense.
To that end, like my answer to that question is, fatherhood has made me more empathetic, more patient, more compassionate, and all those things as well. It's also given me a really good idea of what I'm like at my best and what I'm like at my worst.
Yes. Wow.
Because I didn't really have these opportunities before to have someone just like really get on my nerves or try my patience as much.
Filled with rage.
Yeah, because when they're not your kids, if it's just like somebody in the world and they're getting on your nerves, you're like, well, I can get up and walk away. But I can't like walk away from my kids. And so hopefully I know what the parameter, I know what I look like at my best and my worst, and the worst hopefully doesn't get any worser and the best gets better, you know, because I make a deliberate effort to make that happen. But yeah, I've had times where I've snapped at my kids and I'm like, I couldn't believe that was me. You know, or where I haven't snapped at my kids is more often where it's like kept inside because I don't want them to feel that coming from me. And then I'm like, man, this is an ugly emotion that I've got inside. The flip side of it, of course, is the joy and the love.
Person than me, because I've gotten to that point and it's just like, this is what I feel all the time.
I do know that it is curious to have someone in your life that we've talked about this in our Quiet Place episode. You like to think you would risk your life for a stranger, but you don't know, or you can give your life for another person, but you don't know until that moment. But it's interesting, like with my kids, I wouldn't even think about it.
Yeah. Immediate.
And that's a really powerful type of love to carry for somebody. And, you know, I also, generally speaking, really enjoy the company of my kids.
Because it's something, I mean, I'm an uncle just now to 3. My sister's got 3 kids, and I like the fact that I can hand them back once they're being pain in their, you know, like once they're going mayhem and stuff like that.
Being an uncle is so much better than being a dad. Like, I love being a dad. Being an uncle is 10 times as good.
That's like, it's like when I was looking at you having, like, you know, your business partners, you work together, it's, you know, you're running a show, you lead a team of people. How do you juggle all that? How do you deal with
Badly.
like lack of sleep and stuff like that? Because I was like, I've enough trouble working, doing jiu-jitsu and this, I'm just like, how the hell are you guys keeping on?
Do you mind if I use my analogy, Alan? Do you mind if
Go for it. Get it.
Cinema therapy is like the Millennium Falcon, in that it's always it's bursting across this, it's doing all these incredible things, and you think, wow, what an amazing ship, and
These
it's always
maneuvers and the speed, and wow,
yeah, and it's secretly always on fire. It's secretly always about to crash and burn, or they're secretly, more often it's like the moment where like something's fallen off and you got to fix it so the hyperdrive will work. Like we always get the hyperdrive working in time. And so on the front end, the fans like see the show, and for the most part, there's a new episode every week and everything's running really smoothly. And behind the scenes, it's week after week of, we barely got that done on time. We're getting better. But it's a lot to juggle because Alan and I are, at least with this particular project, have been very ambitious. And sometimes our reach has extended our grasp, but we're growing into it, Yep.
Because it's something I struggle with. I look back and I go, what the hell did I do back in the olden days? Because I can't imagine what it was like before my nephews and niece were born. Now it's like, it's a completely different change. I can't imagine being a father and having somebody that relies on me. That is just terrifying to think about. So to think you guys are...
It's even more terrifying to live it.
To see you guys create such amazing work and change so many lives. And the thought of me letting somebody let me reproduce with them, I don't think that's ever going to happen.
Hey, that's where we both were too, man. Like, no one's ever going to want my seed. And then suddenly...
Oh my gosh.
Here we are.
There's a
bunch of little
for this
Seawrights
episode.
and Deckers running around.
Because that's the thing.
It's probably because you went from woman to woman saying, "Hey, would you like my seed?" Like, and I kept telling you, you gotta build to that.
Oh, is that what I was doing wrong?
Would you?
Damn it!
No one's gonna want my seed. And he goes on Farmers Only and like completely misunderstands the website. So whatever.
That's definitely the tagline of this episode I've done. Because like every time I sit down, I go, "How can I keep this general for the first one?" Before we get into the nitty gritty and stuff like that. And when I think back, just some of what we've discussed today, it's gone bloody hell,
Oh yeah, we're almost always off the rails. You have no idea what gets edited out of every episode.
But that's what I love about your show is like, I know behind the scenes there'll be things that you'll be going, like you won't be speaking to each other for an hour because of it, or you'll be going off and going you can't put that. And I think that's great. But for people listening, the three people that are probably listening, like how would you want people to start using your videos? Is there things you're most proud of? Is there videos you should think people should check out first?
I think you should watch them while under the influence of psychedelic drugs. I think
Absolutely.
You're going to get a
good choice.
Experience. Good choice.
Psilocybin, baby.
Say, is every good therapist?
We don't really have. There's very much a thing where once something goes out into the world, it belongs to the audience as much or more than those who created it.
Yeah.
We don't have a specific, here's how we want people to use our episodes. We have on our membership site, we have a membership site where we go more in depth. Not just in, the director's cut versions of the episodes are longer, they're meatier, they're funnier, they're more inappropriate. They're also, but we also have something called Strength Builders where I take, instead of just talking about the principles, I actually give you exercises. I give you homework. I give you things to do and apply when you've watched a film. And so if you're looking for that, like that's the place to find that. The idea is that if you can't afford therapy or this isn't therapy, but if you like support, and you can't afford therapy, or if you're in therapy and you still like extra support, like we create that. As far as the actual episodes,
honestly, we should ask our Discord.
Yeah,
we have a Discord server. It would be a good idea to have our diehard fans who are on our Discord server, like prescribe. Like, are you feeling depressed? Start with these ones. Are you feeling anxious?
That's
Start
a really
with these
good idea.
Because I was surprised when I went to your show and it was like, heroes, villains. And then I was kind of like, I would have thought you would have had areas to go into. And I mean, every video I've watched, I get something from it and it's amazing. And I know that you've got your cinema therapy heroes, like subscription and stuff.
Yeah, we should do playlists by that type of topic, and people would be like, "I'm anxious. What episode should I watch?" On the hero site, we also have relationship courses that have a lot of specific application, where it's the actual skills I teach in therapy. But the idea is with the YouTube channel is that people can get for free a lot of benefit. Is the idea. Like we don't hold back.
Yep.
I mean, you think of the people that you're transforming. You've done some amazing videos, and it must be amazing to look back and see. But what's been your favorite kind of viewer transformation or a story that's been shared with you?
It's hard to pinpoint a favorite. I mean, the most impactful, we've had 2 or 3 people message us and say, I was literally like not contemplating suicide, but like, I had the bottle of pills out, or I had I was getting ready to do it. Like I was starting to do it. And I thought about one of your episodes and I turned on YouTube and watched you guys, and I didn't.
Yeah.
So those are obviously the most impactful. It's hard to say favorite about that, 'cause it's like, obviously we helped, but
yeah.
I don't want to favorite, close to suicide. That sounds weird.
No.
But the one thing we hear a lot that we really like is that we normalize and destigmatize therapy enough that people went and got help.
Yeah.
And obviously I'm not the therapist. I'm not seeing a dime of that, but just, and so it's not for that reason. It's not building my clientele, although I have gotten clients because of cinema therapy, but it's just that people are, the whole idea is that one of the ideas is that therapists are people, and that you don't need to be afraid of the process. And so hopefully we normalize that.
And they're not always going to get it right.
Yes, that is true.
If a therapist gets it wrong, it's not never go back to therapy or this person is terrible. Just like, oh, maybe you need a different one. Maybe it wasn't a fit. Maybe you need to work on yourself for a little bit, or, whatever.
A therapist is a guide or a mirror, but mirrors have cracks sometimes, or guides have to stop and like, oh, we took a wrong turn near Albuquerque and we got to head back. The idea of a therapist is, it's collaborative, and anyone who's I'm looking for someone to tell me how to run my life is either going to be sorely disappointed because a good therapist won't do that, or their life's going to be a shit show because a bad therapist will do that and will make their life into a shit show.
Man, there's a new show on Apple TV Plus, The Shrink Next Door, that's Will Ferrell and Paul Rudd, and it's literally a therapist who takes over his client's life and moves into his house. We are going to watch this live.
Yes, we are. That's brilliant.
So how could people keep in touch with you and contact you and, go from there?
Best way to find us together is at @therapy_cinema on Twitter and Instagram. We're on Reddit as well. And
Facebook.
We're everywhere. We're on all the socials except TikTok. And then if you're looking for me, I'm at Alan Seawright on all the stuff. And Jono, you are?
Mended Light on YouTube is my so Alan is Telekinesis Entertainment is his production company, and that's where his work lives. And then Mended Light is where I focus in more on like the therapeutic side of things.
Yep.
And then we come together for cinema therapy. So you can also just find me on Twitter, FamilyExpert15.
Well, that's it for another week, and thank you for listening. It's now time to take what you've learned and use it to develop and enhance your life with the key points mentioned. Listen, try it, embrace it, use it, and crush it. Now's your time to hit that next level in your life. If you liked this episode, then please leave a comment on the show notes or a review of the show on your podcast platform. Everything helps evolve the show. Until next week, keep seeking the next level in your life.